Greetings, I'm Christopher Logan Hilt, the G.I. Joe Gamer. I am doing another episode of Joe Takes. This is number 21. And tonight, or today, I should say, we're taking a look at Tomax Xamot from the Hilt. So we'll start with the vintage figures. Now, I really like Tomax and Xamot. They're an interesting duo. I thought it was cool that they were originally sold in a 2-pack, and if I am not mistaken, they were the original G.I. Joe 2-pack. So, get you a better look at them and maybe put the right ones up. And there we go. This one, okay. This one, okay. Now, they came each with this pistol, and it wasn't bad. It's kind of interesting back in the day. They came with this zip line holder. Well, it's the device that connects to the zip line, and it came with this little black cord. I don't have that anymore. I honestly don't know what I did with it over the years. I have had these two guys since they came out, so I probably picked them up in '86, probably about a year after they came out, but I bought them new in the store, and that was kind of cool. Now, I don't have a lot of Tomax and Xamot figures because that was the only ones in the vintage line that they had. There was a couple in the 2000s that came out. There were O-rings that I wanted to show you. Now, I don't want to get these guys mixed up because the only way to tell these two apart in this, and that's a running gag, is Xamot has a scar on his face. And that's the only way to tell these guys apart. So I will keep Xamot like I'm doing down here with the other ones. I'll keep Xamot in my right hand and Tomax in my left. That's because they're opposite, so I want to keep them opposite. So let's see. Now these were they came with the Crimson Command Copter, which I'll give you a closer look at Tomax here without the scar. So. And they were in these little cool pilot's outfits that, were for the helicopter. Oddly enough, it was a 3-seater helicopter and came with 2 figures. But it was cool to get them, and that is a cool helicopter. And I was going to break it out and show you, but it's in my storage area, and I'm not getting that anytime soon. When I move things around to have my studio, I'll probably be able to do that. Well, that's taking longer than I thought, and issues have compounded on me to get that done. So, not having any carded figures, I just have to look at some of the boxes for the classified. Now, it's hard to look at Tomax and Xamot, who are the Crimson Guard commanders, without actually taking a look at the Crimson Guard. Now, I am saving all the Crimson Guard details. I've got 2 of these, and I will pop them up here together because I am going to be doing a Crimson Guard video, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to see how many of these I can collect so that I can have at least as many as I have of my vintage. So that means I've got to get at least 1 more of them, and I have 3 of the Crimson Guard Immortals, and I don't necessarily count those, but I'd like to have at least 5. That would be cool. But the Tomax and Xamot box, however, for each character. Now, I think they missed an opportunity. I think this, again, should have been the first 2-pack for the Classified series. Or at least, that was regular release like Tomax and Xamot were. Now, we've had other multi-packs for the Classified series, but not for something like this, not for really a regular release, at least not that I can remember. I know we had Crocmaster and his Crocodile, and Snake Eyes and Timber, but does that, that's not really a 2-pack of figures. Now, I don't know why they decided to sell them separately as number 44 and 45, but they did. I did like the fact that you could put the boxes together, although backwards, which is kind of funny because they're supposed to be mirror images. So that actually works. And that looks really cool. And I'm glad somebody put together a really nice picture that I was able to find online. And and I was able to use it as the thumbnail for On Joe Takes 21 and as part of the thumbnail for this video. Now that just brings us to the figures for the classified series, and we'll look at Tomax first, and they're pretty much identical figures, only mirrored backwards of each other, and Xamot has the scar naturally. And in the comics, they really played that whole scar issue up when Cobra Commander, both Cobra Commander and Serpentor would call them by the wrong name. They would instantly say, if they called him Xamot Tomax, he'd go, "I'm Xamot, the one with the scar." And Tomax, if they called him Xamot, he'd be like, "I'm Tomax, the one without the scar." It was kind of funny in the comics. And I did like the fact that their voices were on the cartoon were completely different. The Sunmo cartoon, that was nice. Their appearance on G.I. Joe Renegades was really cool too. But they were really different, and they had these mental powers, and the aspect that they played up on that I thought was really neat. So let's take a look at Xamot and see if we can get a good look at his scar, because that's the major difference between the two. Now, I think they missed an opportunity, because on the original vintage figures, they had a sidearm on molded to the figure, and a big gun. So I don't know why they didn't give each of them a sidearm. Instead, they gave them each 2 knives, which is cool. And these knives, they're the same. So basically, you get 4 of these jagged bladed daggers, basically, and they have put one on the leg or the ankle, and then one on the waist, and that's cool. But what made the pistol on the leg make sense was it showed what handed they were, and Xamot was originally left-handed, and Tomax was originally right-handed, based on where the pistols were on the leg. Now I know in a lot of instances they were weird about that on the action figures, that a lot of them were left-handed when they probably shouldn't have been. But on the box art, we got Tomax here with the pistol in the left hand, and then Xamot with the right. So it's like, is this us looking at them in the mirror? Or did they even care? I'm not really sure. Hasbro does have some issues with quality control, and are we just being nitpicky fans? Maybe I am. I don't know. But Xamot's supposed to be left-handed, and Tomax is supposed to be right-handed. They're supposed to be mirror twins, which in reality there is such a thing with mirror twins, that they actually have the organs on the opposite side of the body. And so I always played it up that way, that Xamot had his heart on the left, and everything was backwards. That's actually an interesting, weird anomaly in human beings, where twins can be born with organs on the wrong side when they're more than one baby in the womb. I think that's really fascinating, and I wish they'd have done that more with Tomax and Xamot, or played up on that, or maybe. I know back in the 80s they probably didn't really know about that, but these things have come to light in more recent years. So I guess that takes us to the comic book. Tomax and Xamot appeared in, I'm pretty sure that's issue 37, but let me get my cheaters to make sure. Yes, issue 37. And also it has Flint, and it looks like Xamot on the cover. Now, they got that mixed up a lot. Not so much in the comics, but in the cartoon they had them backwards completely. The way they were, the way they dressed and everything. They definitely had the scar on the wrong side and all that, but I digress. This one also had Footloose, and I'll bring this up here so you get a closer look. This was the direct sales edition, so it didn't have a UPC or barcode is what we call it now. We used to call it a UPC back then. I've already shown off this one. This is 38, and I just dig the comic books. And in this issue, when they first appeared, only one of them revealed themselves to the Joes at first, and they were actually communicating telepathically back and forth. And after that issue, I don't really remember if Larry Hama did much with that. And I don't think he ever did the if one got hurt, the other one felt it in the comic book at all. Now, they were pretty much loyal to Cobra Commander throughout the whole series. Now, during the Civil War, first Cobra Civil War, it seemed like they were on Serpentor's side and sided with Serpentor. But I'm pretty sure they were doing that to keep an eye on him and to make sure that he lost. Because when Cobra Commander came back, Tomax Xamot was right with him, and the Crimson Guard had protected him the whole time, and he didn't have them killed as traitors. So if they weren't traitors and they sided with Serpentor, that means they were following orders from Cobra Commander the whole time, and that they were there to make sure that that Serpentor lost to the imposter Cobra Commander Fred the Seventh, the Crimson Guardman, which is kind of funny because you would think that they would know. I mean, it was supposed to be a secret, but pretty much everybody knew that Fred the Seventh wasn't Cobra Commander. They pretty much had guessed where he came from to know so much about Cobra. But as the series progressed and they appeared sporadically, they weren't in a lot in the comics. It was like Cobra Commander used them for the purpose they were meant for. They were meant to lead the elite in everything. They were meant to get them elected into offices, and they were meant to put them in jobs and positions where they could accumulate power politically and financially. And I think he really didn't. He reserved them for that more so than the battlefield. Now, yes, they took place on the battlefield in the Cobra Civil War. They did this one a little bit. Mostly they used their Crimson Guard though. And the other time that I really remember them being in the field was when they were leading that group of Vipers and Cobra Troopers in Trucial Bismia when they had captured the Joes, and they misinterpreted Cobra Commander's order and thought they were supposed to kill the Joes, and so the Saw Viper stepped up and did it for them, and that's a really dark day in the comics, but because we lost quite a few Joes in that issue, but Tomax and Xamot were the leaders in that mission. It was kind of weird. They were when money is involved, Tomax and Xamot were generally leading those missions. Like in Trucial Bismia, it was because I'm pretty sure that's the name of that fictitious country. But they were all there. Cobra Commander and Cobra was after the oil in that country, so it makes sense that he'd have his elite financial advisors there right on the front lines. Now, maybe not so much leading a team against the Joes, but it was nice, and we didn't get to see Tomax and Xamot very often, so it was cool to see them in that capacity, every once in a while. And that was a really cool series of issues in the early 100s, right up till 109 when that happened. I'm pretty sure it was 109. Anyway, so in the comics, their role was strictly the Crimson Guard. They had, other than that, they had no real place in the Cobra hierarchy ever that they really mentioned. I mean, a little bit when Destro took over, they had a presence there, but they really didn't get involved. And they were always kind of lieutenants to a captain. It was kind of weird. Baroness would take charge of the Cobra Consulate building, and they would be there, and she would be in charge. And when Zarana showed up, and she was given command of the Consulate building, which was weird, but she did. They were subordinate to her in that too, and it was like, well, aren't they the Crimson Guard commanders? But whatever. In some instances, I think that that's how the Cobra hierarchy saw them. They were just the leaders of the Crimson Guard, and so that was their function, and that's what they did. Now, in the Sunbow cartoon, it was kind of completely opposite. Now, this week I did a little bit of research, and I watched some Tomax and Xamot Sunbow cartoon episodes. I watched Red Rocket's Glare, I watched Money to Burn, and I watched Cobra's Candidate, and definitely not in that order. But I forced myself to do this research. But then I treated myself, and I watched the Funhouse afterwards. So that's one of my favorite episodes. So that's where I'm at with that. But then in Red Rocket's Glare, they had this scam going where they were selling people franchises, mostly retirement couples, of this restaurant, the Red Rocket chain of hamburger joints, and it ended up being that Roadblock's Aunt and Uncle bought one, and that was really cool. That was actually a really good Cobra plan, and if they hadn't stumbled upon the whole thing with Roadblock's Aunt and Uncle, they probably wouldn't have been able to figure out that all those missiles were actually on top of the restaurants. And it was kind of a weird thing that they were selling the franchises and then buying them back. But my wife and I, the Tiger, were talking about that day before yesterday, and it occurred to us, and well, it occurred to me, and I pointed it out that Tomax and Xamot were making a profit. They were selling the franchises at a high rate and buying them back low, so they were making money off that. So not only were they fulfilling their orders for Cobra Commander, but they were making a profit for themselves. That's what they did. And then we had Cobra's Candidate, where they were backing a mayoral candidate in Chicago, I'm pretty sure it was. And Scarlett led this team of Joes. And Colonel Sharp talked to her on the radio at the beginning. It was like, we're sending in a unit of Joes. And she said, we're a handful, not a unit. And it was kind of neat. But it was mainly her and Lady J in that, going up against Tomax and Xamot. But they also had Snake Eyes, Spirit, and Zap in that one. It was really cool. And one of my favorite scenes ever in a G.I. Joe cartoon was in that. But I'll talk about that in a minute. Spirit, Snake Eyes, and Zap got captured by the Dreadnoks and some teenagers. It was really weird. It was clear that they were holding back the Joes, but in that, because Tomax and Xamot were utilizing street gangs, young teenagers, to harass people into not voting for their candidate, which in turn made it so they would vote for their candidate. It was kind of an interesting plot and an idea that Cobra Commander had, and it was definitely Cobra Commander's idea, you know. And while the others were captured, Lady J and Scarlett went and tried to see what was going on at Extensive Enterprises, because the candidate they were sent to protect, they followed him right back to Extensive Enterprises and found out that he was working for Cobra. But they couldn't prove it, you know, so it was kind of interesting how they were like, oh yeah, we got to help him, but we know he's working for Cobra, so we're really not trying to. It was interesting after that point. And there was a scene, well, in Red Rocket's Glare, there was a scene where Lady J, Flint got her to break into Extensive Enterprises, and she mentioned that she was afraid of heights, and then she fell off Extensive Enterprises, and then she managed to get a spear into the bottom of the dragonfly that Flint was holding, and she saved herself. But in Cobra's Candidate, she ended up falling off Extensive Enterprises again, and her and Scarlett had climbed the outside of it, and she was like, again, I'm afraid of heights and all this crap. And her best friends, Flint and Scarlett, really, if you think about it, they were her best friends. They were forcing her to face her fears. And she ended up falling and grabbing one of the cords that they were using to climb with suction cups and Scarlett's crossbow. It was kind of interesting the way they did that. But Tomax and Xamot ended up falling off the building completely in that one, and they fell into a trash can. They should have been dead, but they weren't. And Scarlett just closed the lid on them and said, "Good riddance to bad rubbish." And it's like, but they could be dead. She didn't even look. She just closed the lid on them. But it's a kid's cartoon, so you knew they weren't dead. But then back in Red Rocket's Glare, when they fell off the building, they pushed a little button on their wristbands, and these poles came out, and they started grabbing a hold of them and flipping down, all acrobatic like. They were portrayed as very acrobatic, like they'd been in the circus or something. They could perform feats of agility that were just incredible, and for a cartoon, that was kind of interesting. Now, we come full circle to money to burn. And the whole concept of that was Cobra Commander again had this really good idea. He'd burn up all the money and then replace it with his own currency, which was an interesting and devious plot. And the Joes actually worked their butts off to stop that plan. But in general, Cobra usually screwed up their own plan, and not in this instance. In that one, Tomax Xamot started the episode off by jumping out of an airplane above the Extensive Enterprises tower, doing some flips and landing on the roof of their building, and then just walking inside. And it's like, okay, we're going to suspend our disbelief for that for just a second, just because it was awesome. But that was the cartoon, and that episode again had Lady J going up against them in disguise, and it seemed like Lady J and them had this rivalry going. And there was a scene with Tomax and Lady J where they were chasing Lady J on skis, and Lady J fell over, and Tomax went, I'll go collect her, and he went down to get her, and he grabbed a hold of her spear, and they were struggling with it, and there was this whole exchange with them where Tomax said he always was willing to be in a competition of somebody obviously so inferior in a contest of strength. And Lady J said, I feel the same way about intelligence. She pushed a button and a rocket blasted out of the spear and chucked him off the cliff. And naturally, Xamot came down and was like, Tomax, what happened? It was pretty cool because he could feel all that, As far as Tomax and Xamot were concerned in the comics, they were as cool as they were comic relief with their whole, they fill everything the other brother fills. I really enjoyed them on the Sunbow cartoon, more so than I did in the comics, and that's a rarity for me. I normally like the comics more. But Tomax and Xamot were definitely more interesting in the cartoon, but they definitely had more time to work with them. They had an entire season to give them backstories, and they really did work with Tomax and Xamot in quite a few episodes. But those were my three favorites, and I wanted to share some of that with you. Now, in my headcanon, I'm very much on Larry Hama's side, but I do add elements of the cartoon as well. They are the leaders of the Crimson Guard, but they are Cobra Commanders. They're a commander rank in Cobra, and it's Cobra Commander's favorite rank, so every Cobra aspires to be a commander in my headcanon. So now there is hierarchy above that, and then of course whoever is in command of Cobra at the time, even above that. Now whether that's Cobra Commander sometimes or Serpentor other times. There's even been instances where it was Overlord, and in my headcanon I had Cobra Commander in prison for a long time, and I've got this MAG game, military action game coming up where I'm doing a G.I. Joe campaign in it, and nobody really knows what happened with Cobra Commander, and Cobra's kind of supposed to be defeated at this moment in time. So that's kind of my headcanon going on right now, but we're just talking about Tomax and Xamot, and I just see them at the top of the Cobra Trooper level, but that's a lot of different Cobra, well-known Cobras, like Wild Weasel's at the top of the Cobra Air Force. He's a commander of the Cobra Air Force. Copperhead is the commander of the Cobra Water Forces. It's just that's the way I see things in my headcanon. But that's just me, as far as comic book, they were just the Crimson Guard commanders, very loyal to Cobra Commander through the whole series. I did like that aspect. As far as I could tell, they never went against the real Cobra Commander. In the cartoon, it was quite different. They went against him all the time and took over Cobra, even in the Pyramid of Darkness, the first time they showed up. They didn't really do that so much after the fact. There was a really cool, I consider it a Baroness episode, where it was the spell of the siren, where she got the conch shell from the sirens and could make any man follow her orders just by blowing in the conch shell. And if they heard the sound, they were now mesmerized and had to follow her orders. And she got Tomax and Cobra Commander in that, but Xamot had escaped, and he actually helped the Joes defeat the Baroness and Destro, who started working together. It was it was a lot. There's a lot of cool Tomax and Xamot moments in the cartoon. Again, like I said, more so than in the comic book, but they were cool in the comic too. So there you got it. You got it. That's my take on Tomax and Xamot, and I hope you enjoyed that. Now, next week, I'm looking at a OG GI Joe character. I'm looking at Stalker, and I don't have the vintage Stalker figure. I never did. I've always wanted it, and I do want to pick up one, but I haven't been able to at the moment. I do have a vintage Stalker, and I will be showing that off next week, but it's not the original. And they had 5 or 6 vintage Stalkers, so I'll let that be a little bit of a surprise. And my promo, my On Joe Takes 22, will be up on Monday, and you'll be able to see the classified figure, and with a little bit of music and some art and some file cards, and we're just going to enjoy some G.I. Joe together. With that all being said, Logan out.